Throughout her tenure as White House Communications Director, Hope Hicks has kept a pretty low public profile. But now that she's leaving the West Wing, she is getting loads of media attention, and some observers sense more than a whiff of sexism.
Hi! Merry Christmas, everyone! And thank you, Donald Trump!
For someone who's been with Donald Trump from the beginning, Hope Hicks has a distinctly un-Trumpy M.O., namely, she stays in the background. And now she's on the way out.
The woman who had perhaps more power than anyone to grant access to the president is leaving.
As she goes, plenty of attention's being paid to Hicks's unusual path to the West Wing.
She served as then-candidate Trump's press secretary. She worked for the Trump Organization. She was close with Ivanka Trump.
A former model, she joined the family working on Ivanka Trump's fashion line. Now she helps run the White House.
But frequent reminders that Hicks once worked as a model have become a point of contention. Laura McGann of Fox calls it a sign of implicit bias, noting that Hicks only modeled until she was 16. The Boston Globe's Joan Vanacki thinks the press never took Hicks seriously, writing she was often described as a former model with no political background who had mysteriously worked her way into Trump's inner circle. Then again, Hicks herself has admitted she's no political expert.
I knew very little about politics, obviously. I wasn't expecting to take part in this, and certainly not to play the role that I had.
Still, critics say she was underappreciated in that role. One the New York Times' Maggie Haberman says went beyond just communications.
She is constantly having to manage his moods. She is constantly having to protect other staffers from his moods.
A job only a model adult could handle. So I went back and looked at some of the coverage of her decision to leave the White House, and I will respectfully disagree with Joan Vanacki. I thought there was a lot of attention paid to how important she was and how much she had accomplished in her political ecosystem at a very, very young age. That being said, there were also those model references. For the record, the Washington Post put it down near the end of the piece. The Times put it right up top. And given that she did model from when she was 10 until she was 16, I think it's legit to criticize that. Josh?
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, it reminds me a bit of the way that the Times gets rightly criticized, or at least has on a few occasions, when there's an obituary for a woman who has had, you know, a remarkable career in science or whatever, and in the second paragraph says she was a loving wife and mother to three, which is, again, something that it's unlikely that a man would be treated the same way. I sort of go in the middle of some of the points being made in the piece, because on one hand, I understand, and I think it's accurate to say that the references to her being a model were overdone and were a result of her being a woman and were inappropriate on the part of the press. On the other hand, I think it's also true that it would not be quite accurate to call her a wunderkind, because part of the reason why she gets this sort of reaction is that Donald Trump does not have the greatest history of picking the most talented people to be in his inner circle, just to be blunt. You know, we just talked about Mr. Sam Nunberg earlier, and he was of that same ilk, and that he was in the Trump universe and sort of got grandfathered into the political world. And you know, someone like Hope Hicks, who didn't have that political background, seems to be very good at managing his moods, and that's a very important skill. But I don't think that there's a complete flip side that should have been related.
I have a different perspective. I don't blame it so much on sexism. I remember numerous reports about Scott Brown that referred to the fact that he was a former model. I think the media has a negative attitude towards people who are models and regards them as unserious.
It's been an issue for me throughout my career.
Has it? Yeah. But what I'll also say about Hope Hicks is that a lot of the criticism of Hope Hicks comes from other women. And to me, it read much more like Mean Girls than sexism.
I thought the coverage was sexist. I thought that the Vox piece made a couple of good points that I hadn't really thought of before. First of all, I didn't realize that she had only been a model between the ages of 10 and 16. But I also think that they made a good point that this, by referring to her as a former model, it's essentially a stand-in for saying she's really, really attractive, which is something that the media tend to be uncomfortable coming right out and saying. I think that part of the problem here is that although insiders may have known exactly what she did, it wasn't clear to people on the outside what she did. She was kind of a mysterious figure. Maybe that means that she was very good at her job. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like there was a whole lot that you could say about her, except she's a former model.
Well, and that it fell to her to protect all of Trump's staff from his mercurial moods, which is a huge thing. So.
The shorthand for the media is not model, does not just stand in for very attractive. It stands in for dumb. Right. That's what it meant when they said it about Scott Brown, and that's what it meant in this instance. And absolutely, that is sexist. Stop talking about the woman being a model. I don't care what you think about her. That's enough already. So if you really want to talk about whether or not you thought she was capable of doing that job, you could say the last person that had this gig did this and this and this. She came, with a different set of experiences. The president valued her, I don't know, skill as working with his daughter, however you would put it. She's definitely not going to be thought to be the wonder kind, that's for sure. But she also wasn't the dumb girl model either. Clearly, she filled a niche in the White House that somebody thought was valuable, however we on the outside view it. And if that be the case, then it's our responsibility on the way out, on her way out, is to say, here's what she did. Now, maybe she did it badly, but we don't have to lay on top of it that she's a dumb girl. And it didn't help, by the way, that she was dating a couple of people inside.
Right, Corey Lewandowski and then the likely spouse abuser, Rob.
Which is her business. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. That's her business. But I'm just saying that whole picture.
The women of the Trump White House don't have it easy. I mean, there have been numerous critiques of the appearance of Sarah Sanders, of Kellyanne Conway. In Hope Hicks's case, it was different because she is so stunningly beautiful. But they are often talked about in terms of what they look like. And I would argue that that is partly sexism, but it's also because they are Republican women and liberal women do not like them.
I can give you a litany about what was said about Hillary Clinton. Don't even go down that path.
But I'm talking
what's said about Ayanna Pressley? What's said about, name a woman. They always have something to say about how they look. And by the way, Mean Girls is a part of sexism. So you can be a mean girl and be sexist. It's okay.
That may be.
I'm just saying that's part of the discussion.
Harshest critiques have come from women.
No, you got to come with some more than that, girlfriend. No. Not today.
Josh, you want to get the last word here?
Just two quick points. One, I mean, talking about someone in the frame of what they did from 10 to 16 is the equivalent of saying so-and-so was a JV basketball player in high school, right? It's pretty irrelevant.
That I actually
right.
Was, so.
and I'm sure you were very good. The other piece is it's hard to talk about this without mentioning that there have been ugly rumors about women in Donald Trump's circle as sleeping with him to get it in advance. I mean, Michael Wolff very irresponsibly started talking about these rumors in a way that was completely unfair to the women involved. And I think that you could say that saying that she's a model and saying that she's attractive and saying that it's unclear how she got this job, like there is a very sexist hint at the core of that, and that's another reason why.
Part of that is who we're bosses.
They were just saying,
gotta leave it there.